lawful solutions for Moors, Black Moors, Moorish Americans, Black Indians, African Americans, Moorish subjects, and all other naturalized or colonized colored people.
Hello, this is the Moorish Podcast, and I am Amir Hassan El. I am the Vice Prime Minister of the Empire of Morocco and also the Wazir of the Allodium Moorish Peridium Ante-Oregon. I'm glad and happy to have the Sultan of the Empire of Morocco with us today, Sultan Kendon Bey. We're going to have a fireside chat with the Sultan and see what's on his mind and see how he's been since the last time we met. Sultan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. How about yourself, Wazir?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah. You know, I've been listening to and watching some YouTubes and some other platforms and about what the Moroccans or the Moorish subjects and Moorish Americans have been talking about. And, you know, there's a little, some of them are talking about unity. And I'd like to ask you, Sultan, if it's okay, can you speak on the importance of unity in the Empire of Morocco? And why is that so important? For obvious reasons.
Yes, thank you for the question. I mean, you know, it's ironic, you know, you asked that particular question in reference to unity. You know, I've been thinking really a lot about unity, and I don't think the Moors, you know, they really understand the importance of unity as well as the different aspects of unity. You know, I'll use, you know, basketball as an example. You know, if a group of people are going to get together and unify and say, okay, well, hey, you know, we're going to start a basketball team. You know, we're going to enter a tournament. You know, they unify to accomplish that particular goal, you know, to win the tournament. And, you know, to use that as a reference point, this unity that we need, you know, from an Empire Morocco or state perspective, most of our people have never encountered that type of unity. You know, they really don't know what it really looks like. We've had certain parts in time where we have came together as a group of people. You know, when George Floyd got killed, you know, we can go as far back as, you know, the Million Man March. We came together with unity in a unified way, you know, to accomplish a particular thing. Well, you know, with statehood and decolonization in the Empire of Morocco, unity is needed to accomplish this goal. You know, trust, you know, has to come with that unity as well as education. Education is very, very important. But the unity that it takes, our people, you know, we have never came together in that aspect. You know, a lot of people don't want to, you know, respect governmental authority from a Moroccan perspective, even though they respect governmental authority from an American perspective. You know, here it is. I hear a lot of Moors say, okay, well, yeah, the United States doesn't have jurisdiction over me, and, you know, I'm not going to submit, you know, to that government. But in your everyday life, you're submitting to that government. And here it is, you know, we have an opportunity to have our own government, to have our own heads of state, you know, for Moors to have an opportunity to pretty much start their life over, you know, to get opportunities that they never would have within the United States legal system, whether it's from, you know, past criminal history, or whether, you know, it's just the color of your skin, certain opportunities involving the United States government, you just won't get those opportunities. But, you know, back to unity, to make that a reality, we have to unify. You know, it's a lot of Moors. They don't really understand, you know, how important the Empire of Morocco is and what it brings. You know, we're so quick to bash each other and say, you know, well, you know, what you're saying, Noble Drew Ali didn't say this, or, you know, we didn't learn that. And it just keeps that division between us instead of us coming together saying, okay, well, hey, I understand what you're saying, and it's vice versa, but can you explain to me why you're saying the road that we need to take with the Empire of Morocco? Why is that sufficient, right? Why is that the road that we need to take to get to an understanding what works and doesn't work? And, the biggest thing with the unity is the commitment. Um, about a week ago, I did a podcast, Thomas Weekly Bay, shout out to Thomas Weekly Bay on the Grown Folks podcast. And, I asked a simple question, who's ready to commit? Who's ready to commit to uplifting fallen humanity? And no one can say anything. And, that's one of our main problems when it comes to unity as well, the commitment aspect. For us to run a fully functioning government, for us to create laws and legislation, and, for the United States and the rest of, the states on planet Earth to respect us, they have to see that commitment, right? Because if we're not committed and we're not serious about our freedom, our future, the land that we say that we're indigenous to, then they're not going to have that same sense of urgency. So, it's time for Moors to start to commit, and if you're not ready to commit, that's understandable, but the logistics of us accomplishing this goal with decolonization, coming back into self-governance and, govern over these territories, it's going to take a strong level of commitment. And that just has to be understood, to make this a reality. And we have to unite. We have to really start to care for one another in a way that we never have before, because we got to have each other's back. Once people start to grow in their understanding about decolonization and, the legal process, what it takes, we have to stand together like we never have before. And, that's just the reality of taking the steps to decolonize and self-governance and, lawfully get from under the jurisdiction of the United States. Without that, I yield.
Okay, thank you. You talk about, we have to unite, and I'm thinking about the times when the Black Moors united in the past, like what was it, the city bus boycott, almost a full year, I think it was, that they did, they boycotted the buses. People walked or they share rides, but they did that, and that was a form of unity, right? So they saw the issue. It seems like they saw the issue, understood it, and band together. In our situation, you can go down the street and ask how many people, if they know about the Moors, and you'll get a blank face. See, so they're not understanding our issue, maybe. Um, uh, More awareness, maybe. I don't know. What do you think?
And that's a good follow-up question. I totally agree with you. You pointed out the boycott. At that particular time, they were able to physically see, the subjugation and the harm that was happening with the situation, with the bus. And, by Moors not being educated, about international law, about decolonization, about state rights, they can't really see the position that we're in as a group of people and what is being done to us to put them in a mind frame, as you spoke about with the bus, to say, okay, enough is enough. And, it goes back to, why I do these podcasts. We have impact study sessions with Chief Justice J. Bay. Why we put this information out? Because we're trying to raise everyone's awareness to a point where they understand the injustice that's taking place with us on our land, from a legal perspective. So, until they start to educate themselves and really start to pay attention to, the information I'm putting out, Chief Justice, as well as yourself, with this podcast, the sense of urgency will never be there because they feel like, it's kind of under control already when, in actionality, it's not. So that was a good example that you gave in reference to, the bus boycott and, why Moors don't see the sense and urgency in decolonizing, proclaiming your Moroccan nationality and, taking your proper seat within the government of the Empire of Morocco. With that,
Right.
I yield.
Okay. Okay. That was a great answer, Sultan. Let me ask you this. How can the Empire of Morocco solve all of the problems as copper-colored people have from judicial and economic standpoint?
Thank you for the question. And again, that's a wonderful, good question. We'll start with judicial. The more educated that the Moors get, about truly how the United States legal system works, they'll start to understand that the legal system, it creates the world around us. It decides what happens and what doesn't happen. The Empire of Morocco, from that reference point, it has the ability to do those same things, but just particularly for our people. And it has a judicial relationship with the United States, which allows us to create laws and, create our reality here on planet Earth. And I don't think Moors really, understand the significance of that, for us to be able to create laws and legislation and, be able to send that to the United States, and they have to give it to their legal team, and they have to say, okay, well, these Moors are operating through a state, right? The laws that they send to us, we have to respect them. Let's look over these particular laws that they have created, and now we have to make laws to go around their laws so we don't infringe on their sovereign rights. And that's a very, very important tool, that we never had. And, when it comes to legislation, it's numerous things, that legislation can be created for, whether it's with jobs, dealing with property and land rights, with jurisdiction. It's a lot of things that the treaties give us access and authority over that the United States has in their jurisdiction, which is illegal. And they're giving prison sentences for these particular things. So from a judicial standpoint and a jurisdiction standpoint, it gives us an opportunity to step on the other side of the law, because these treaties give us an opportunity to say, okay, well, according to this particular article of the Treaty of Madrid or, the Act of Algeciras, these particular things are legal. And then we can start to set up reforms or legislation to govern how they work when it comes to a Moroccan. But without the state and the judicial aspect of the state, we don't even have that opportunity to do that in the United States. As everyone knows, you have the Europeans, they're making legislation govern us, so we're basically just sitting at home or going about our day. And, now you may realize, okay, they passed this new law. Now I have to get in alignment with it. From an economic standpoint, and this is public record, the United States of America, they owe us taxes, and it is so much, the back tax, it's not even a number that actually can get put on it. But, from an economic standpoint, the state can start to collect the taxes that's owed. According to the treaties, the state is the only person in law authorized to receive those monies, not the individual Moors. And to coincide again with the judicial aspect, to incorporate it with the economic standpoint, now we can begin to create jobs and create institutions, right? We can start to govern the natural resources here on our land, right? And start to monetize it. But without the state and the jurisdiction and authority that the state has, we don't have access to any of these mechanisms, and you can go on YouTube, you can go back since we've been here in America. They have subjugated us and marginalized us for so long and weaponized, their legal system against us, to where, it's beyond not fair. And, from a legal perspective, we have an opportunity, to do things from a judicial standpoint and an economic standpoint that we never had before. And, without the Empire of Morocco and the treaties, we'll never get that opportunity to, build these state-of-the-art, hospitals or, universities or, corporations, that's governed by the Empire of Morocco with the Empire of Morocco's jurisdiction. It's just so many things that the Empire of Morocco has available for us, and again, as a reference point with the United States, it governs our life. Every opportunity that we have from a governmental perspective and an economic perspective, it comes from the United States government. So, if people can open their minds and just look at the United States government as a reference point, because it's functioning. It has diplomatic relations across seas. It has corporations across seas. It has corporations and business and subdivisions. It has all of this, right, in these colonial charter states, whether it's Texas, Colorado, Oregon. So, you just transfer that perspective to looking at the Empire of Morocco and say, okay, well, hey, we have a state, maybe we can implement this, or we can implement, this aspect of the government and have protections, and we can start to build our future and our foundation in a way that we never have before. But that I yield.
Okay. So you first started off talking about how the Empire of Morocco has legislation and it can make laws. And then you said that those laws can be applied to the United States. An example, do you have any? And, thinking, like a blackamoor, hearing this for the first time thing, how can the Empire of Morocco influence the laws of the United States, and why? Is it because they're in the Empire of Morocco, therefore they have to follow the laws of the Empire of Morocco, or is there some type of treaty that specifies that? I'm asking as though I am a blackamoor with these types of questions. Okay. So
Yeah. Oh, okay. I didn't know if you were through.
I am. Please go forward.
Okay. Well, yes. I can name numerous examples, but the first one that I can name in reference to the government in the state. When the United States of America, they signed these particular treaties, the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, the Act of Algiers, they understood the concept of government and that we were allowed to have a government. And by us having a government, we can do what governments do. So that leads me to my next example, license plates. We've created legislation, to issue governmental license plates for diplomats as well as for regular nationals in the internal Moroccan states, which are located or sharing jurisdiction with some of the colonial charter states. But we had to create legislation. We had to send their legislation to the United States to where they had to take the next step to notify their authorities to say, okay, well, hey, there is a Moroccan state operating in this jurisdiction as well as us. This is the particular license plate number. We have no jurisdiction. But without that foundation of the treaties giving us the authority to have a government, to get into governmental functions, we could never make that mechanism or that process come together with sending them notice about these particular plates. Because go back to the treaties gave us authority to have a functioning government. And governments, they issue license plates. Court with court procedures according to the treaties. I'm always lead us back to the treaties and us having the authority to have a functioning government. A judicial system was attached to that. So with that judicial system attached to the government, now it puts us in a position where when we're dealing with them from a judicial standpoint, now we can have our cases transferred to the Moorish Council of Court. But again, without the treaties giving us authority, right, to have the government with the three branches of government and a judicial aspect is connected to that, we would never have the mechanism of having a different court to hear our case. And, it goes back to your previous question, how can the Empire of Morocco solve all copper-colored people problems? It can solve it in any way. Any way that you can think of, the Empire of Morocco can solve it. But, the misunderstanding is we need the people to wake up and understand this concept, and you all come back home and sit in these governmental seats and help build the foundation, right? Because what's a government without people, right? You need the republic, you need the people. With that, I yield.
Okay. You also mentioned, let's see, you're talking about the laws, and you want to just kind of let the blackamoors know that the Empire Morocco is a superior government. And, I noticed you said we were allowed to have government. Well, we were the first government here. So actually, we allowed them to come here and set up government. Um, so therefore, we have the original jurisdiction of this landmass. And, a lot of people never heard of the Empire of Morocco. Sultan, a lot of the Blackamoors, they may see this interview and there may be an interest, but the first thing that comes to their mind is, what's in it for me? If I leave the United States, what security do I have? What economic freedom can I look at? Can I get? Those are things that are important to them. Can you address that?
Yes. That's a good question. What's in it for me? And I think, first, the Moors have to understand, the nature of a state, and how a state functions. But, just to point out one of the perks, what's in it for you, it gives you an opportunity to use Moroccan courts, right? According to the treaties, right? We say, the 1836 Treaty of Peace and Friendship, any dispute between a Moroccan and an American, the Moorish or Moroccan Consular Court gets to hear the case. I want you to really think about that. Any dispute between a Moroccan and an American, the Moorish Consular Court gets to hear the case. Now I'm going to use an American and an American standpoint. The treaties also state any American and American dispute, an American court has to hear the case. And this is the concept that most Moors don't understand. And you're wondering why you're getting summons to an American court, because you're American. And again, these simple concepts are what the Europeans or the United States, they understand. So that's, one of the benefits. Once you proclaim your Moroccan nationality and you come back home, now you have a right to use a Moroccan court to hear the case. But I'll go a step further. What if you are participating in the legislative process, right? You're in the Empire of Morocco and you're creating laws, right? So you know the laws. So now you're in a dispute with an American and they're trying to tell you something is illegal, but you just was on the legislative committee and you know this is legal. So once the Moorish Council Court gets the case in their possession, you already know what's going to happen, right? And I know that concept probably went over a lot of people's head, but that's a very powerful thing for you to understand the law and be a part of the lawmaking process that puts you in a position where once the case gets heard from a Moorish perspective at the Council of Court, you already know that the case is going to be in your favor. And again, that's a power that we never had. From an economic standpoint, I pointed some of these things out, in the beginning about us having opportunity to collect taxes, as well as, to create institutions and create, refineries and corporations from a Moroccan perspective, right? It's a lot of vacant land here in the United States, but we don't even have the authority, right, to even touch some of those lands. But from an original jurisdiction standpoint that the Empire of Morocco had, being here before the United States, we have access to those lands. And I'll take it a step further. You can't get in diplomatic relations or trade with other countries unless you're a state, right? As an individual, you can't trade directly with China, right? Natural resources for natural resources, or whatever the trade is between the two countries. But us operating through a state, the Empire of Morocco, it allows us to set up those diplomatic channels to where now we can speak with China directly about electric cars that the United States are not even allowing over here, right? We can start setting up car factories here on the land, and now we can start shipping these particular cars out to these foreign countries. But, I want people to really understand without the state structure, these things that I'm pointing out, we don't have access to them, right? And it's going to leave the United States in a position that they've been in to make these negotiations and trade with these other foreign countries. Why? Because they're operating through a state and we're not. So, those are just some of the things, off the top of my head that, I want to point out when it comes to benefits. Keep in mind, we have a state, everything that a state has, we have it. So, go ahead. You can ask a question.
So as a state, we can do everything the United States is doing. You have all these different departments, education, so on and so forth, and run it the way we see fit as
Correct.
a state government.
Correct.
So we're not lacking anything that they have other than we putting it together as a government. But we need bodies, you're saying, to help fill those different departments, and so our government can grow. It's just here waiting for qualified people to come in and sit in those seats. That's what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay. Wow. So we're at the beginning of this big corporation. I'm using that as an example. The term corporation. And we're on the beginning stages of it, and it has potential to be a very, very huge corporation again, which means that it's like
I'll say enterprise, the great
enterprise. Okay,
enterprise.
thank you. A great enterprise, and for those who come in to help build that enterprise, it'll just be something not only for themselves, but for their families, members, and friends who are also Moroccans or not Moroccans, but excuse me, Blackamoors who have the ability to become Moroccans and for generations after them. And their generations after them won't have the same type of struggles that they have and that their grandparents and ancestors, excuse me, has had to get to this point. It's the biggest thing I've ever seen or heard of is that the Moroccan Empire comes back online and gives Moroccans an opportunity to soar beyond the skies, really to soar with their government, with no shackles, no limits. And that's important to understand as a government to have no limits.
Correct. I
Yeah,
want to also, point out, I want to make this clear. The United States is located within the Empire of Morocco.
right.
That's one of our treaty obligations. These European states, whether it be France, whether it be Russia, but, particularly the United States at this time, our job was to govern over the United States while they were here in this land. So,
Mhm.
from a conceptual standpoint, think about it, look at it like this. We have a United States of America in our land, right? And it has so many components. So, if you had a piece of land and you was approached to say, okay, well, I want to build a Walmart. They want to build a Walmart on your particular land.
Mhm.
Think about the benefit that you would gain from that particular Walmart being located on your land. Now we're going to switch gears. We have a United States of America on our land. This is one of the biggest corporations on planet Earth, and it's in our land. But from this, you don't get to get this perspective until you come back to the Empire of Morocco, as you just stated. We need the people, we need the body to help oversee and govern this United States of America that's located within our land, that has the Walmarts, that has the Walgreens, that has the Beverly Hills, all these new subdivisions and businesses that you see here in America. This is in the Empire of Morocco. So
Right.
make no mistake about that. a year.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I would like to try to just impress on those Blackamoors who will be watching this and trying to figure out what's in it for them. The sky's the limit. But anyway, again, there's other conversations out there that I've been hearing, and I'd like to share some of them with you and get your perspective. Um, Let me ask you this. There's some things going on, you know, with Blackamoors in the seats of government in the United States. Can you name something that disappoints you the most about our brothers and sisters working for the United States government?
Thank you for the question, Wazir.
Mhm.
Man, again, that's a good question. And, I have to go, right straight to the point. I'm real disappointed in our brothers and sisters that they never speak about decolonization. If you go back to the 50s, 60s, the 40s, slavery, us being hung, even the subjugation that's going on right now, decolonization has been the answer to our problems since the beginning. And, for a group of people in our position that have been colonized, marginalized, subjugated, mass incarceration, weaponized the judicial system against us, decolonization is the only real answer. So, if that is the truth of the matter, how come you never see any of these representatives, Jasmine Crockett, Leslie James, any of these people speak about decolonization? You never do. And, for me, growing in my knowledge and what I understand about international law and, decolonization and self-determination, there's no other word or no other concept that they should be speaking about. So when I see them online, and they act like they're fighting for our rights or they're fighting for some type of change. In actuality, they're really not. And again, decolonization is a very powerful thing. Decolonization has put us in a position again to where we were able to take back our mother state, right, and put us in a different formal conversation with the United States about laws and rights and how we're going to get treated as a people, right? And we're not waiting on them to pass legislation specifically about, the information we're bringing to them. We're at a stage where now we're going to create legislation and let you know how you're going to treat us. And now you need to go back to the drawing board and now you need to work around that. And we never had that opportunity. But, my main point that makes me disappointed, if decolonization puts us in that position to have that type of authority, why are none of the Black Americans that work for the United States government, why are they not speaking about decolonization? Like, that is very ironic to me. And, it just, it's very disappointing because I know most of our brothers and sisters, they're not educated from an international law perspective, with legalese and these particular type of things. So a lot of this information, like they really don't know and they don't understand the significance of it. But what I've grown to understand, most of the Blackamoors that sit in the United States federal government, they understand law and legal procedures and jurisdiction at a very high altitude. So, for them, not to speak about decolonization and us truly getting our land back, it's just very disappointing to me. And, I wish that would change. So, any of the Blackamoors, whether it's you, Jasmine Crockett, or, Leslie James, or any of the Blackamoors that work for the United States federal government, you need to start talking about decolonization because decolonization is the only answer. Again, that's why I salute to everyone who's involved with the Empire of Morocco, who's taking this step to build the foundation of decolonization and do what we're doing to put the state back together and to decolonize in full, to put us back in a position where, we have our land, we have our rights, we have access to our resources, and we can start making executive decisions based on what we want to do with our land and what we want the future to be like for the next generation, period. With that,
Yeah.
I yield.
Okay. Yeah, I see a lot of those blackamoors that are proteges in the U.S. government, as they're waving the flag, man, of the United States, because it's putting butter on their bread, basically. They got high uh, wages, their jobs, they're making a lot more money. They've got some power, some authority in their positions, and therefore um, they probably don't want to give it up for what they think is I don't know, a fluke or something that hasn't been proven yet. And once it's get proven, then the floodgates may be overloaded. But until then, they're playing it safe, even though with these new laws about the Voting Rights Act, which is scaring the heck out of them, because they may be losing their job and position because of gerrymandering. Um, it's a perfect time to come aboard, at least investigate, find out what this Moroccan empire is all about. It's a perfect time, because quite a few people have or will lose their jobs, federal jobs. And we just need to get the message out, um, and we're doing our best at this point, but as we continue to grow and keep spreading the word, hopefully more will, take the time out to study more and listen to Chief J. Bays and ourselves on these podcasts and on impact study sessions, because there's a lot of information in those broadcasts, a lot. So we have to just keep at it, I'm thinking.
Yeah, I agree with you. But I also want to point out, I can sympathize with them because, until this point in time, I do get all the Moors that have came before us. They really made a mockery of what being a Moor is. All the YouTube videos you see the Moors being belligerent, the Moors going and vacant houses, and saying that this is my land, and just taking people's property. So I understand, there is kind of some vagueness there, when you hear the term Moor. Uh, but again, I'm still hard on them because of the certain legal jargon that we use here at the Empire of Morocco is so much more different than the average Moor that you may see online. Our approach with it, we're speaking about UN resolutions. We're speaking about ratifying and depositing certain treaties. We're speaking about the original jurisdiction, these type of legalese and terms that if a person's not competent, they're not going to be using these terms in their proper perspective. So, that would still leads me to still feel like it makes me disappointed in them because I know if a competent person hears this conversation or hears the perspective where we're coming from, they understand that we're competent and we understand what's taking place and we know what we're doing. So I still have a heavy hand for them from that perspective because I know they're all subject matter experts and they're trained in the field of law. But with that,
yeah, some of the Moorish Americans that you say give Moors a bad name are looking at like sovereign citizen type of activity, and the difference is we're statehood. We're building a state, a legal state, and that's the difference. We don't have the same issues that the Moorish Americans or the sovereign citizens have. When they get pulled over, they want to handle it right there on the street, as opposed to taking it to court and handling it properly. So I see that as a difference, and I see that when Black and Moor see that a lot of the Moorish Americans being confronted by the police and then getting dragged into jail, it gives them it makes them kind of scared to go that route because of the fact that they don't want to get involved in going to jail behind something that they don't see working, but that's not us. We're not sovereign citizens. We have a state, just like the United States, just like Russia, France, those states that are part of the UN. We have a state, but our state is growing, because it's been resurrected, and we need seats filled in our government and with competent people. Yeah. So those are my thoughts on that. Sultan, can you explain why it is important to secure the protections of the Empire of Morocco as a Moroccan national before becoming involved in civil or criminal proceedings in the United States?
Yes. I'm online a lot. I watch a lot of YouTube videos. Legal proceedings dealing with Moors. And I see how they think, and they don't understand that when dealing with the United States. I'm going to incorporate, the Treaty of Madrid in this particular aspect, and I want everybody to pay attention to what I'm about to explain. A lot of Moors, before they pledge their allegiance to the Empire of Morocco and they try to get protections or understand that aspect of protections, most of the time they have already committed a criminal act or some type of civil litigation within the United States as an American. And, it doesn't turn out the way that they feel like they thought it was going to play out. And now they're trying to secure Moroccan protections or use a Moroccan legal argument. Well, unbeknownst to them, Article 5 of the Treaty of Madrid, it speaks about having all prior civil or criminal affairs taken care of before the Empire of Morocco can grant you protection. And, we're not the only ones that know that. United States, they've been know it. They know our treaties better than we do. So, with that concept being true, that puts a block between you and you actually getting protections or the remedy that you're seeking. Because the treaty stipulate you have to have these prior affairs taken care of. And, back to your question, this is why it's important for the Moors to understand these judicial concepts and processes to where if you did have the protections and now you're in a litigation with the United States, they can use Article 5 of the Treaty of Madrid against you and say, well, look, this particular person is still an American citizen. They can't seek protections, or the Empire of Morocco, according to the treaty, is not allowed to give them protections. And this is why, that question that you pose is so important for Moors to even understand these concepts and why they need to study the treaties, why they need to watch impact study sessions, because these concepts, you will learn this and you'll have a thorough understanding about how the treaties work, how jurisdiction works. I see a lot of Moors, again, working backwards. Then you have to look at it from a jurisdictional standpoint. If you haven't lawfully renounced your United States citizenship and pledged your allegiance to the Empire of Morocco, when the infraction happens with you in the United States, what's your nationality, right? You're a United States citizen. Mm-hmm. So lawfully, they have jurisdiction over you at the time that the infraction happened. But then you will go to court and you would say, well, you don't got no jurisdiction over me. I'm a Moor. And they're looking at you like, well, we don't have nothing from the Empire of Morocco. We don't have a renunciation document. We don't have an oath and allegiance document stating that you were a Moor at the time of this infraction. So on our record, you're American and we have jurisdiction over you. And they're going to try to prosecute you as they do with the full extent of the law. So this is why it's so important for Moors to understand these concepts and for them to take the necessary steps to educate themselves and proclaim their Moroccan nationality so they can have protections like insurance, right? You have your insurance, you have an accident, Now the proper legal process can start in that situation. And in that situation, you would have the opportunity to have the Moorish Council of Court hear the case and have jurisdiction over the case. And you'll be in standing in law when you go to the courts and say, okay, well, hey, I know you gave me a court date to come up here today, but this court has no jurisdiction, and I'm challenging the jurisdiction. Now the proper legal process takes place to where they're looking at these properly written documents. They're looking at dates, right? They're looking at names of heads of states, right? They're in communication with the United States, as well as the United Nations. And now they're gathering all this information, finding out that it's true. And now the exchange can happen. Okay, well, yeah, you are a Moroccan national. Let's switch this case to Council of Court because this is where it belongs. So again, without you pledging your allegiance and having the protections before you get in a situation, it's kind of hard to work backwards in time. And now you're trying to seek Moroccan protections when you're not knowledgeable about the treaties and there's certain clauses that doesn't allow you to get those protections without you fully finishing whatever legal situation took place before you tried to seek protections. With that idea.
Okay. In the Treaty of Algeciras, I believe it's 103. I may be wrong. But let me ask you, it says that more subjects should be punished by Sharifian government. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
Yes.
It says foreigners should be, punished by Moorish government, and then more subjects should be punished by Sharifian government. I think it's something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if the Sharifian government can punish Moors or Moroccan Moor subjects, can't they also protect them?
Correct.
Okay.
100%. It works both ways, and I always got to go back to the, experience of using the United States as an example. The same way that their laws work, with certain protections or, being able to prosecute in all these legal situations. The Empire of Morocco has that same jurisdiction, and, to take it a step further, what makes the Empire of Morocco so unique, right, out of every other state on planet Earth, the Empire of Morocco, when it signed these particular treaties with these 12 signatory powers, the United States being one of them, they gave civil and criminal jurisdiction to the Empire of Morocco in the Council of Court. Mm-hmm. No other state on planet Earth has this type of agreement with these colonial states. None.
Right.
And to give you an idea of, what that looks like or what it feels like, just think about law enforcement or the government, in whatever colonial charter state you live in, right? It's police that's, out and about. If you commit a crime, they're going to take you to jail. They're going to take you through the legal system, right? And it's really nothing that you pretty much can do about it. Right. Well, they gave that same authority to us, but the only difference we have been missing from running a government, to have certain institutions, to have certain police in these colonial charter states, to have judicial systems, to have jails. We haven't had these institutions set up. But again, here we are now, we have an opportunity to do that, but that's just really pretty much been the difference between now and then, and why you haven't been able to, fully see our jurisdiction and how it works. Because, to really be honest about it, the Empire of Morocco has been in the shadow of age since 1956. And then even before 1956, the Arabs, they were pretty much controlling the empire. But I use that as an example, to point out pretty much probably George Washington, John Adams, these particular people, they are the only pretty much European people that have actually seen a Moor with authority or understand what we're explaining. Most European or white people right now, in my day and time, or, pretty much we'll just go back from probably like the 40s or the 50s. they've never seen, for sure here in the West, a true Moor with power, with judicial power. They understand that they can be prosecuted. They understand that property can be confiscated. They never seen this before. So again, this is new to them as well. But just because it's new doesn't mean it's true. It's not true. And this is, where we are now. We're getting the proper perspective out there to the people, understanding this. And this goes for Moors too. Most Black Americans, they never seen a real Moor with power. They never seen a Sultan. They never seen a wazir, a governor, that's located in one of the colonial charter states. I'll use Colorado as an example, that has power, that's corresponding with the governor of that particular state, letting the governor know about certain legislation that's passed. There's certain diplomatic relations that's taking place between them. A lot of our people have never seen it. And, they're just now coming into understanding this point in time with myself, you, and the rest of the government officials affiliated with the Empire of Morocco. With that, I yield.
Okay. Okay, Sultan. Again, as we watch the different platforms, we see some other groups claiming to be, the Moorish empire, the Moroccan empire. They know about us, but they choose not to join us. They wanted to start their own government. How do we best handle this situation when we see that?
Thank you for the question. Man, what Moors must understand from a legal point of view, we have already took the necessary legal steps to establish the Empire of Morocco and the Moroccan nationality. And that's what makes us so unique and so special. Any group of Moors on planet Earth, copper-colored people, they could have figured out that we had this sitting government that was sitting in the shadows, and that it need to be reemerged. And this is why I give so much credit to Jay Bay. He was the first one that figured it out to come back and teach people like myself and you the proper concept of what needed to actually be done. So when you ask the question about Moors who may not want to join the Empire of Morocco and say, okay, well, I want to start my own Empire of Morocco. I want to declare my own Moroccan nationality outside of the empire. I want Moors to understand from a legal standpoint that can't be done. You're going to run into the legal hurdles of finding that out because, we have already claimed the Moroccan nationality, not for us as individuals, but we have claimed it through the state for the people. So the people can have a government to come back to. So people can have the rights that's in the treaties associated, with the land and the laws and the reforms that, we have an opportunity to create. And, I don't think a lot of Moors really have got there mentally to really understand it, because they do their best to try to move around the Empire of Morocco. But, they're online still claiming that they're Moors and they're Moroccans, not understanding that your Moroccan nationality, it has to come from the state.
Mm-hmm.
Just like being American. If you want to be American, you have to go to the United States federal government. You can't meet nobody online. And they give you some documents and they tell you to take this in court. And now, you can enforce American law when you didn't go through the proper naturalizations or, immigration process, whatever that process looked like to becoming an American citizen. So that same rule applies when it comes to the Moroccan nationality. You have to come through the actual Moroccan government. And you may say, okay, well, why, you're the Sultan, and why, this guy, Jay Bay, and, Wazir Amir. It goes back to what I said at the beginning of the question. We were the first ones to understand what needed to be done from a legal perspective to bring the government back into fruition, right? To make Moroccan law enforceable. From the time that the Moors were involved with, self-governance and, dealing with government, the international, right, community, it has evolved. It evolved so much, to where dealing with the United Nations was a key thing. You know, a lot of us didn't even understand that what part the United Nations played in dealing with indigenous people, right? Or dealing with self-governance. Like, you know, we didn't really understand it.
Okay, Sultan, here's a question from NBC. Why do you people think you could be the new Empire Morocco while most states around the world have identified the Kingdom of Morocco as the continuing Moroccan Empire Moroccan state? Um, they've been we've been used to in doing business with the Kingdom of Morocco. What makes you think you can take that place as the Empire Morocco?
Thank you for the question. Well, you know, and that's one of a legal question. You know, Moors or, you know, the general public have to understand, you know, what took place with Muhammad V in 1956 when he was coerced to step down from Sultan to becoming king and establishing the Kingdom of Morocco. You know, the Kingdom of Morocco is a new state on planet Earth. But in that transition, when Muhammad V stepped down to become king, he left the Empire of Morocco on a shallow grave or adjourned senior dita. You know, this is legal terms, you know, and it's pretty much a legal process. But the government was left pretty much vacant and void of a government. And, you know, you have this term called presumption of continuity, right? And this is what this basically means, you know, something is portrayed to be true until it's contested. So once Muhammad V stepped down from being Sultan and became king and established the Kingdom of Morocco, the world just continued on as the Kingdom of Morocco, as the ancient state, the Empire of Morocco. But from a legal perspective, that wasn't true. And, you know, this is one of the things that was hidden from us, hidden from the general public, you know, for all this time. And, you know, from a legal perspective, this is how, you know, we understand that the Empire of Morocco, the ancient state, it is the original state, not the Kingdom of Morocco. You know, you can also look at the treaties, you know, whether it's the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, 1836, 1880, Treaty of Madrid, or the 1906 Act of Algiers. None of these particular treaties, you will see the name Kingdom of Morocco. You know, when you're dealing with treaties and contract law, the parties must be known. And, you know, international judges, the ICJ, they understand this very well, you know, as well as how jurisdiction works. And once you begin, you know, to look at the inner workings of treaties and jurisdiction, it's easy for you to recognize that the Kingdom of Morocco is not only the Empire of Morocco, a continuation of the Empire of Morocco, but it is a modern state operating within a defined territory as a modern new state on planet Earth. You know, the empire and the kingdom, you know, from a jurisdictional perspective and a legal personality perspective, the Empire of Morocco, it crosses borders when the kingdoms, they don't cross borders. And a reference point would be the state of Texas. You know, when you think of the state of Texas, you think of this defined territory. You know, if you go so far east, you're in Louisiana. You go, you know, so far, you know, north, you're in the next state over. Well, the Kingdom of Morocco works like that. But in reference to the Empire of Morocco, it crosses borders and it exists at the same time with another country or state. And we'll use the United States of America and the Kingdom and the Empire of Morocco. The Empire of Morocco and the Empire of Morocco and the United States of America, they exist simultaneously at the same time. So a person can be in Texas in the United States and be in the Empire of Morocco at the same time. In the Kingdom of Morocco, the legal personality of it, it doesn't have that personality to exist simultaneously in a different country at the same time as the empire does. So, you know, that's a very particular legal question. And you can go read the ICJ, judgment on the matter. We did bring the case to the ICJ in the year 2026. We did get an advisory opinion. So these are all public records. But I just want to give you all a little clarity of what we understood from the beginning, from a legal perspective, an actual perspective, how all of this was possible, and the difference between the Kingdom of Morocco and the Empire of Morocco. With that, I yield.
Okay, thank you.